Hello everybody and welcome to part 5 of this breakdown of the Outer Realms. In the previous part we looked mainly at green screening. In this part we're going to look at the effects as the adventurers prepare for the arrival of Zarkon. We'll do a quick rundown of some of the available animation software and then we'll create the portal through which Zarkon arrives.
Unbelievable.
He is coming.
So let's look at how we made that light appear at the top of Delana's staff, and at the same time it gives us the opportunity for a brief introduction to Hitfilm keyframe animation. So we're in Hitfilm and I've rendered the entire scene, including the green screened characters, into a single video which I've imported and put into a composite shot. I've found the place on the timeline where we want the light at the end of Delana's staff to begin to appear, and that light will be another light flare, just like we used with the treasure chest in the last part. So here's the one that we used. Hitfilm comes with lots and lots of different light flares, and each of these can be customized to look exactly how you want them to be. And I will use Spotlight Hard, and I won't customize it at all. All I will do is change the hotspot position and put it roughly where we want it on top of the staff. I'm then going to scale it up, and let's say that's what we want it to look like when it's fully lit. But of course we don't want it just to appear fully lit, we want it to increase in the intensity of light. So to do that I'm going to create a keyframe animation on the intensity property. So any property for any effect that has this little circle here, you can add a keyframe. So if I press it, Hitfilm will remember that at that point on the timeline intensity needs to be, in this case, 1. But of course we don't want it to be 1, we want it to be completely off, so I will change that keyframe to be 0. I'll then come forward about a second in the timeline and I will change the intensity back to 1. So now if I play it, our light gradually appears. Now Hitfilm has lots of different types of keyframes, so the ones we've used here are called linear keyframes. And if I show you the value graph, let's I thought I could zoom in. Let's zoom in a little bit. Change to the value graph, and we can see that between these 2 points in time it increases intensity in equal steps along the way. So just to scrub through, as we go through, the light gradually appears. So if I change those keyframes to another type, so this is the constant keyframe. For the constant keyframe, it will keep the same value of 0 until it hits that next keyframe, and it will immediately change it to 1. So we're at 0, we're at 1. Another type of keyframe is smooth. So think of this like ease in and ease out. If you use that for animation, we gradually build up the speed, become quite linear, and then gradually decrease the speed as we get to the next keyframe. A variation of that is smooth in. So we're linear and then we slowly come into that next keyframe, decreasing the speed. The opposite, smooth out, slow, gradually increase, and then we're linear till we hit that next point. And the last one is Bezier, which gives us these little handles so we can make that graph look pretty much how we want it to look. But we're going to be using linear, and there we are, equal steps all the way. So I'll come off a value graph. The other thing I want to do, so let's select that keyframe so we've got our point in the timeline, and I want there to be a glow just around here as well, or a little bit of light that's shed. So I will create a plane. I will use this blue color and I will say OK. And of course, because that plane is at the top of the stack, it hides everything below it. So I will turn down the opacity so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to create a mask. Now, I've only found out how to do this today. I'm going to create the ellipse mask. I'm going to click in the center of the staff head, and then I'm going to press Alt and Control, and when I drag, it creates a perfect circle centered on that point. Now, as always, to make the last, let's reframe that, sorry. We want to feather the edge because we've got the hard edge. So we've seen this before, just feather it a little bit. But again, when I play through this, we don't want that blue plane, that blue light to be there all the time. So we want to keyframe the opacity at the same point as we keyframe the light turning on. So I double click that keyframe to take us to that point in the timeline. I turn on keyframes and I turn this down to 0. I then go to the second keyframe, double click so we're fully bright, and then I'm going to change that opacity, let's say to 31. So now when I play through this, we get both the light and that light shining over Delana at the same time. And the very last thing I want to do, come back to where we have keyframed the opacity, which is here, and I'm going to add a sound effect. I'll turn it down because I know it's going to be too loud. Wonder if we've got it in the right place. Not too bad, just move it across a little bit. Maybe just a little bit more. So we have the light flare growing in intensity over time using keyframes. The plane which throws light over Delana's face, again increasing in opacity using keyframes, and we have our sound effect. Making the wrist daggers appear is quite a simple stop motion trick. You animate with them off, and then when you want them to appear, stop animating, put them on your figure, and then continue animating again. I did it a slightly different way. I didn't want the wristbands to appear from nowhere, so I animated with the wrist daggers on and then used the erase tool to take the blades away. And we will see the erase tool used when we put the Rogue's hood on. But before we do that, let's look at some animation software you can get on PC. So I use Stop Motion Pro Eclipse. I do like it, I'm familiar with it, and it has all the features that I use often. Now, it wasn't cheap, and after some Windows updates, a couple of annoying issues have crept into the software, and I'm a little bit concerned that I don't see it being actively developed. So let's look at some alternatives. So you can't mention software animation on desktop or PC without talking about Dragon Frame. It's actively developed, it's very well supported, fantastic piece of software, fully featured. Many of those features I would probably never use, and it is quite an investment. Another piece of animation software I've looked at is called Anima Shooter. The features look good, it seems to be developed. It's a pretty decent price compared to the other two pieces of software we've seen so far. But for me, I can't find a way to import sound, and I always animate to dialogue. I know many people don't. so it's not the software for me. And the last animation software I'm going to look at for desktop is Zoo 3D. Now, I do own this. I'm very impressed by it. I didn't realise it had all the features that I use in Stop Motion Pro Eclipse. It's still developed. It's a fantastic price. But the quote, designed with children for children, that probably explains the colourful user interface. So if you can put up with that colourful user interface, it may well be worth checking Zoo 3D out. Even though I don't use mobile devices to do my stop motion, I do have to mention Stop Motion Studio. There's a pro version, which I believe is $5. I know a lot of people that use it, and they generally give good feedback. After all that, let's look at the Rogue putting on his hood. So this is Stop Motion Pro Eclipse. I've got some animation in here, so if I play it, it's the animation of the Rogue putting his hood up. Now, if you notice, when I get to around about here, he doesn't have his hood on, and all I did was stopped animating and put his hood on in the next frame. But what we want to do is we want to make it look as if his hood is being pulled up over his head in these previous frames. So I am going to go into the Erase tool. So it's a bit like rig removal if you've done that. Here's the eraser. And this little window up here, it's asking me, what do you want as your underneath image? So that if I erase something on here, it will show this image underneath it. And I know that I want image number 21. That's where the hood appears. So if I erase something on here now, we will see start to reveal this image underneath. So let's go to roughly where he starts pulling his hood up. Let's say this frame. And of course I would do this more carefully normally. And if you can see me erasing part of the of this image to reveal this image underneath it. So let's do that for now. We save the changes, go forward a frame, and basically that's what we do. We just go forward frame by frame, being a lot more careful than this in real life. Erasing one of the images to show the hood underneath. So I won't do too much of this because the principle is the same for every single frame. Speed it up a little bit, and of course I can change the size of the eraser to get into some of the smaller corners. I'll just do one more. So this is a tricky one because I don't want to erase those wrist daggers. Let's go down over his face like this. So I'm hoping I've done enough here. Let's do one more just in case, because this could be, there we go, that's a better one. As I say, I'd be a lot more careful if I was doing this for real. And I'll go back to my animation, and even though we haven't completed it, go back to the beginning. We can see his hood, I'll do it again, slowly being pulled over his head. And once I've completed all of those frames, it will look like the video. So now the Rogue has his wrist daggers out, he has his hood up. Let's make him disappear. So here we are in Hitfilm, and I've created a composite shot and built a scene ready for our Rogue to disappear. But before we do that, if you look at our media list, it's beginning to get quite long, and soon it might become difficult to find what we want to use. So I want to organise it a little bit better. So to do that, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it videos. And into that folder, I'm going to select the videos in my media list and just put them in there out of the way for now. I'll create another new folder, call it images, select the images that exist in my media list, put them in that folder, and finally I'll create one called sounds, and I'll do exactly the same thing. So it's just made our list a little bit more manageable so that we can find the resource that we want to use. So let's make the rogue disappear. So here we are at the moment. If I play this, the wrist daggers come out, the hoods go up, and around about here we want him to start disappearing. So very much like we did with the light staff, Delana's light staff, we're going to come to the transform properties. We're going to set a keyframe for opacity. We're going to go forward a little bit, and then we're going to bring it down to 0, and you can see he disappears. Now to go along with that, we want to add a sound. So I'll add the sound effect to our timeline. And there you go. Now if I turn off the background, you can see that this is a green screen I've used. If you're not green screening, you can use a very similar method by using what's called a clean plate. So here I have a very rough image of our rogue standing in front of a background, and if I turn that image off, we have a picture of just our background. This is our clean plate. Now you have to make sure that the lighting stays the same, you don't move the background, you don't move the camera, but what I can do here is exactly the same thing. I can set keyframe for opacity, come forward a little bit, turn it down, and we've produced the same effect but without the green screen. And there we have our rogue disappearing. It's now time for Zarkon to arrive on the scene, so let's see how the portal effect was created. So we're back in Hitfilm. I've created a composite shot and I've built this background scene. So I've got the background, and then I've green screened Zarkon walking onto our set, and then I'm just going to have him stand there to give us a little bit of time. But what I want to happen is I want Zarkon to walk through a portal. So to create that portal, I will create a new plane, and I will drag it down below the Zarkon videos but above the background. And onto that plane I will drag the dimension rift effect. Now I will admit up front that I find dimension rift a little complicated, so I've already messed around to find some of the values that I want to use so I don't have to do it in front of you. So at the moment we have the portal or the dimension rift, but it's hiding our background. So the first thing I want to do is open dimension rift, and I want to tell it which image to use as the background or the wall image, and I will use our background. Now I want to change the shape of it, and this is some of the work I've done already. I want to position it at -650 so it moves to the left. I want it to be 3 times as big, and on this portal roundness I want it to look as if it's sideways on, so I'm going to change portal roundness to 2.0. And now when I scrub through, we have our portal. It will slow my system down a little bit, and then Zarkon walks on and completely ignores that portal. So what I'm going to do is on Zarkon here, on the Zarkon AVI, I'm going to create a mask around the portal. I'm going to create a freehand mask, and I'll do it quickly here. Just mask this piece off, and then I'm going to feather the edge to something like that. So if I fit it back into the screen, press play, Zarkon looks as if he's coming through the portal. Now we want that portal to open. Well, the first thing I want that portal to be is a different colour. So the primary colour at the moment is a nice blue colour, and because Zarkon isn't nice, I'm going to change it to a green colour. I am going to come to expansion, and this is where it opens and closes. So at around about 2, I'm going to keyframe expansion. So at about 2 seconds in, keyframe expansion, turn it all the way off. And then about a second later, I'm going to put it back to 1 again. So if I scrub through, you will see it bends the background as the portal opens and then fully opens. The next thing I want to be able to do though is when it's fully open, I want to see the world that Zarkon is walking from. So to do that, let's make things a bit tidier. I will drag in this picture of a desert planet. I can turn it off, and then in the dimension rift view parameter, I'm going to tell it what it wants us to view through the portal, and that is our dimension rift, our desert planet. Now, at the moment, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen because we haven't connected to that world. So that's the connection parameter, and I will keyframe 0 at that point, come forward about a second, and then I will turn it fully on. And when we scrub through, the portal opens, we connect to that other world, and then we see it there completely. Now the size of that desert planet isn't right, so if I go into view, change the scale, and I'm going to double the size of it. So now when I play through, let's come back to there, the portal opens, Zarkon walks through, and then we want the portal to close again, and that's going to be the exact opposite of what we did here. So let's get to a nice point. We will add a keyframe of 1, so press this button. Oh, in the wrong place. Let's get rid of that. I will select connection, add a keyframe of 1, come forward about a second, and I will turn that down to 0. And then in between, on the expansion parameter, I will click this button to say, remember there's a keyframe there of 1, go forward a second or so, and turn it back down again. So I think we should be done. Let's play that through. Portal opens, Zarkon walks through, portal closes behind him. The last thing we need to do is let's find those keyframes again. I'm going to add a sound effect, let's say there. Turn down the volume of it because they're always too loud. And then I will duplicate that sound effect, move it to where we want it to close roughly. And the last thing in between those two sound effects, I'm going to add, let's say about there, some footsteps. Turn those down as well. And then maybe cut that sound effect, delete the extra, and we should be complete. And there we have Zarkon arriving through our portal. So Zarkon has arrived, but I definitely hold this scene far too long. So that's a sin for our series run in total. So that's it for this part, a bit of a mix of different topics. In the next part we're going to look at the wizard battle, we're going to have a short demo of the Filmstro music software, and then we're going to look at the aging effect that was applied to Delana. Thanks for watching.